Hey, check this one out. This is a Gibson Les Paul Custom Forgery. Stick around if you want to check this dude out. Grandpa bought a rubber the other day. She's a pretty thing, isn't she? I mean, check her out. This is a Gibson Les Paul Custom Forgery, obviously, made in Japan, which is an oddity. Most of these are made in China, you know, as far as that goes. But this was actually built in the 70s by a company in Japan called Matsumoku that built these exact guitars with the lawsuit headstock, you know, the open book headstock that Gibson uses. And there was no actual lawsuit era. A lot of people get confused with the actual lawsuit times, but the only lawsuit that really happened back in the 70s was Gibson suing Ibanez, who was making exact copies and knocking them out of the park. Matsumoku made a pretty cheap guitar, you know, kind of cheaply made, a little bit better quality than the Teisco stuff that was coming out. But even though this was probably branded Teisco and somebody put a Gibson headstock logo on it, Gibson custom headstock logo, Matsumoku did a pretty good job at putting these guitars together, so they made good copies, you know, forgeries, I should say. If you look closely, you can see the outline of the decals. These are decals, not inlays. Now those are inlays. Of course, they were done by Matsumoku in Japan. Body, 5-ply binding, 6-ply binding, 1, 2, 3, 6-ply binding. I mean, they didn't do a bad job at all. The top piece, it's a pretty good piece of wood. Of course, it's a laminate. Nice, decent pickups. I'll turn it over. Economy tuners. Bolt-on neck. Makes it not a Gibson, of course, but that binding on the back too. This is a decent, besides the thickness of the body isn't thick enough, but this one's got a couple chips on it. Not bad, but it was somebody's player. Back in the 60s, Teisco out of Japan built a lot of brands, and they were inferior in the 60s. And near the end, Matsumoku combined quite a few other names too that came out of Matsumoku. They decided to pick up the quality and do better copies. And that's one of these. This one's a 70s model, and the quality had gone up quite a bit from the 60s, because the 60s they produced a lot of junk, and it really was junk. But this one's a little bit better. I would say 70% roughly. You know, as far as compared to a Gibson, you're about 70% there. I mean, it is. There's a lot of things they didn't get right, but at least the quality was coming around. And they built a lot of brands out of the Matsumoku factory, but a lot of them are worth a lot of money. This one would be worth more if it still had Teisco on the headstock instead of Gibson. But, you know, it kind of got ruined, you know, but back in the day, especially in the 80s or so, these things, you could pick them up at pawn shops for 25 bucks. They didn't want them, you know, they They thought they were inferior throwaway guitars because of their history. But they got a little bit better. This one actually was set up well, and you know, somebody really played it as a pro out there. It was their second guitar, the person that owned it, and he used it for years. He put different tunings on it, different strings, heavier gauge strings, and down tuned it a little bit to play a few songs. But it was his second guitar, it wasn't his main guitar. But it got a lot of playtime on it. You can see it. I mean, he did play a lot of lead on it. Another strange thing about this guitar, this is not a 24 3/4 scale. This is a 25 1/2 inch scale, which is kind of strange for something shaped like a Gibson. The neck is it's hard to see with the naked eye, but is a slight bit longer than the 24 3/4 scale. Of course, the bridges are spread out a little more. You got a person that's used to seeing real Gibson Les Pauls will pick it up with their eye when they walk in when they see something like this. But anyway, this is a forgery, fake, whatever you want to call it, a Gibson J. Gibson, made Japan. It's not a Gibson, which comes out of China. But this part was not produced by Matsumoku. They had actual brand names on there besides the forgery ones. Japan did forge a few, but this isn't one of them. I've seen the Japan forged Gibsons, and they're really nice. But I mean, they always make the same mistakes they do in China. But anyway, that's, you know, a little bit of information to maybe help you out. The bolt-on neck, dead giveaway. You know, you don't even have to bother with the, you know, it's got 3 truss rod screws in it. It's supposed to only have 2, one at the top and one in the middle at the bottom. The headstock decal is obviously fake. You can see the outline of it. It's not an inlay like they do at Gibson, but this is a water slider. It might even be a sticker that's been kind of clear coated at one time. But if you're playing on stage, it's going to look, you know, it's going to look kind of real anyway. But the 25 1/2 inch scale made it kind of comfortable. The guy that played this apparently was a Strat guy, and he liked the fact that the scale, that's why he made it one of his main guitars. He liked the fact that it had the same exact scale as a Fender instead of a Gibson, which is kind of cool. But of course, it doesn't have, you know, Gibson tuners. If it was an old 70s guitar, it would. It'll never have the bolt-on. All Gibsons are basically set necks. There's a few bolt-on models throughout the years, but Les Paul's not one of them. They've always been set neck. But that's one thing to look for. The truss rod, you didn't have to remove the cover to know that you won't have the brass nut underneath it. You'll just have a regular hex head truss rod in it that takes an Allen wrench to get to and to adjust. And this one will have it. I don't even have to bother to take it up. But of course, these are 3-bolt pickups. That's of course not something that Gibson does. So the mounting screws are wrong on this also. But I mean, there's a lot of things that you can notice. So this one is a bolt-on. It is incorrect. That's one thing you can look for. Always look at the decals, see if that's real. Truss rod, brass nut, fit and finish. Gibsons will be better than any of the China-made ones that you see out there. The body, of course, will be thicker. The hardware's different. It has the pins that hold that in. I mean, there's just a lot of things wrong with this. It's easy to spot, you know, on the wall. When you first glance at it, if you don't see the outline of the headstock decals, you may not pick it up, but it's not too bad. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell and all that good stuff. But anyway, y'all be cool. Grandpa.